guides. George Archer could not read any of it. Not a single word. Yet he won 32 professional tournaments. He dominated 2 different tours across 5 decades. He beat the best players in the world and walked off every course knowing that nobody, not one person outside his family, knew his secret. This is that story. George William Archer was born on October 1st, 1939, in San Francisco, California. He grew up just south of the city, in San Mateo, not in the wealthy neighborhoods near the golf courses, but on the rougher side of town. His childhood friend Mike Jameson would later describe it simply: George had a very rough and tumble childhood. School was a constant struggle. Teachers assumed he was slow. Nobody understood why a boy who seemed sharp, funny, and aware of everything around him simply could not absorb written language. This was the 1940s and 50s. Learning disabilities were not identified, not treated, and rarely even discussed. Children like George were quietly left behind. Then one afternoon, a neighbor suggested they walk over to the Peninsula Golf and Country Club to earn some extra money as caddies. George had never heard the word before. His response was immediate and honest. What's caddying? That question changed his life. He took to it quickly. He liked the work, liked the money, and liked being on the course. Every Monday, when the club was closed to members, the caddies were allowed to play. George showed up every single week. The problem was that Monday afternoon also meant basketball practice at San Mateo High School. George was 6 feet and 6 inches tall. The basketball team wanted him badly, but golf won. He missed too many practices. The coach removed him from the team. And without fully realizing it, George Archer had just made the most important decision of his life, not by choosing golf, but by refusing to give it up. By the time he graduated in 1958, he was already one of the strongest amateur golfers in California. In 1960, George was playing in an amateur tournament in Sacramento. A 17-year-old girl named Donna came to watch, not because she followed golf closely, but because, as she later admitted, he was really tall. They talked across the ropes on the 13th fairway. He asked her out. The first date went well, the next one's even better. George was funny, warm, and easy to be around, but he had a habit Donna could not quite explain at first. He avoided written things. He never picked up a menu and read it out loud. He never commented on a sign or a newspaper headline. Small things, easy to miss. Then one night, everything became clear. They were driving together when a police car pulled them over. It was dark. Without hesitation, George leaned over and whispered, "Trade places with me." Donna, 17 years old and frightened, did exactly that, no questions asked. Afterwards, she asked him why. "That's when he told me about the reading," Donna recalled, "that he didn't have a driver's license. He had never been able to pass the written test." At 21 years old, George Archer could read at roughly a 3rd to 4th grade level. Despite years of effort and consultations with multiple experts, he would never progress beyond that point. He could write only one thing with confidence: his own name. Donna was surprised, but she was not discouraged. "I wanted to help him and take care of him," she said. "He didn't have much help in his own family. I was 17 years old, so I had a lot of illusions." They married in 1961. From that moment on, Donna managed everything that required reading or writing: finances, contracts, correspondence. She became, quietly and without credit, the invisible infrastructure behind one of professional golf's most remarkable careers. George Archer had his weapon. Now he needed to learn how to use it. After getting married, George and Donna moved into a small apartment in San Francisco. The rent was modest. The meals were simple, spaghetti most nights. But right across the street from their building was a public practice green. That green became George's laboratory. Most evenings he would head out with a group of friends and play for small stakes, dollars, quarters, whatever anyone had. When the sun went down, they aimed their car headlights at the green and kept playing. On a good night, George won enough to take Donna out for dinner. A place called the Ranch House served prime rib for two at $15. Those were the victory meals. What George was building during those nights was something that would eventually rewrite the record books. He developed a feel for reading a green that had nothing to do with reading at all. It was pure visualization, tracing the line of the ball with his eyes, feeling the slope through his feet, trusting what he saw rather than what he calculated. His friend Mike Jamison later offered the most compelling explanation. People with learning disabilities, especially reading disabilities, do visualize things. And in putting, if you can visualize the ball going into the hole, you have achieved 90% of the goal. In other words, the same condition that had made school impossible may have been quietly sharpening the one skill that would define his entire career. By 1963, George was the finest amateur golfer in California. He won the Trans-Mississippi Championship, one of the most prestigious amateur titles in the country, reached the semifinals of the U.S. Amateur, and caught the attention of Eugene Selvage, the founder of Lucky Lager Brewing Company, who offered to sponsor him on the professional tour. Selvage also offered something else, a place to live, a trailer on his 5,000-acre cattle ranch in Gilroy, California. The Gilroy Cowboy was about to turn professional. George Archer turned professional in 1964. Within a year, he won his first PGA Tour event, the Lucky International Open, played on his home course at Harding Park in San Francisco. The hometown boy had announced himself, but while the world saw a rising star, George was quietly managing a daily obstacle course that no one else on tour had to navigate. Every week brought new situations that required reading: entry forms, hotel check-ins, restaurant menus, yardage books, sponsor contracts. Donna handled everything she could. When she was not there, George found ways around it. At cafeterias, he ordered the same familiar foods, no menu required. When he needed to sign a check, Donna prepared a template in advance, and he copied it. When more money was needed, he called home and they worked through the writing together, over the phone. The leaderboard was its own challenge. At every tournament, the massive scoring boards listed players alphabetically. George knew his name sat on the left side, near the top, under the letter A. His friend Larry Ziegler's name sat on the far right, under the letter Z. So George tracked his position by counting the gap between the two names. That was his system. It worked. The deeper fear, though, was not logistical. It was psychological. Donna understood it clearly. It was a golf thing. He didn't want to give his opponents any advantage over him. He knew that if somebody knew about it and said something, that he probably wouldn't be able to handle it. He would crack. His friend Mike Jamison agreed. He knew exactly what rival players were capable of. There were some players who were pretty hard-nosed and would have used any trick in the book to get inside someone's head, like saying, "Hey, George, how are you going to read this green?" One sentence. That was all it would have taken. So George said nothing, and he kept winning. The week before the Masters, George nearly won the Greater Greensboro Open. Then his final round collapsed. He climbed into the car with Donna and drove south toward Augusta, Georgia. Upset, frustrated, and not saying much. That drive set the tone for what followed. Monday through Wednesday at Augusta National, George was sick with the flu. He spent most of those days in bed, barely practicing. Donna would later say he had a compromised immune system. If anyone around him had a cold, George would catch it. That week, he caught something worse. By Thursday morning, he was behind schedule, underprepared, and physically drained. He shot a 67 in the first round. Good enough for second place, one stroke behind Billy Casper, a two-time U.S. Open champion, and one of the most experienced players in the field. After a second round 73, then a third round 69, George entered the final day trailing Casper by just one shot. What happened on Sunday, April 13th, 1969, remains one of the most dramatic final rounds in Masters history. Casper stumbled early. He played 5 over par through the first 10 holes. George, meanwhile, gained ground steadily. Birdie here, par there, and by the time he reached the back nine, he held a 3-shot lead. That was the moment the mind started talking. I started practicing my acceptance speech, George admitted afterward. I heard myself and said, "You better shut up, you have 9 holes to play." He was right to stop himself. At the 15th hole, a par 5 with water guarding the green, George hit what he thought was a clean approach. "I thought I hit a real good shot," he said, "but it went in the water, and I felt like I was in the water with that ball." The lead was gone. In the gallery, Donna watched with her heart sinking. "I thought that was the end," she said. "I didn't think he would be able to recover from that." But George Archer did not fall apart. He steadied himself, parred the remaining holes, and finished at 7 under par, a total of 281. When the final groups came in, 5 players had held a share of the lead at some point during that back 9. When the dust settled, George stood alone at the top, 1 stroke ahead of Casper, Tom Weiskopf, and George. Arnold Palmer, watching the closing holes, reportedly called George's approach into the final green among the finest shots he had ever seen under pressure. Inside the Augusta National Clubhouse, the green jacket ceremony began. George, all 6 feet and 6 inches of him, attempted to slide his arms into the famous jacket. It was a tight fit. Amid the applause, he grinned and said, "I'm amazed they have one my size." The room laughed. The cameras captured the moment. What nobody in that room knew, what nobody in the entire world of golf knew, was that the man now wearing that jacket could not read a single word of the news coverage being written about him at that very moment. Winning the Masters should have changed everything. For most champions, Augusta opens doors. Major endorsement deals, television appearances, commercial contracts, a level of fame that follows you for the rest of your career. For George Archer, it opened a trap. Shortly after his victory, he signed a contract with Bullet Golf. They wanted him to film a series of commercials. It seemed straightforward. Show up, say some lines, collect the check. The night before the shoot, George could not sleep. There was a script. He was supposed to memorize it, deliver it cleanly, look natural on camera. When the crew arrived at the course the next morning, George told them directly, "I'm not going to read this script. I'm going to improvise." It took 33 takes to get through the commercial. 33. That single episode explains more about George Archer's public legacy than almost anything else. He was a Masters champion who could not capitalize on being a Masters champion. Not fully, not freely, because every endorsement, every scripted appearance, every public-facing opportunity carried the same hidden risk. One wrong moment, and the secret was out. So he stayed quiet, he stayed careful, and the fame that should have followed him never quite arrived. On the course, though, nothing slowed him down. He underwent surgery on his left wrist in 1975, his back in 1979, and his left shoulder in 1987. Each time, he returned. In 1980, he set a PGA Tour record at the Sea Pines Heritage, completing 4 rounds with just 94 strokes on the greens, fewer than 1.5 per hole across 72 holes. It was, at the time, the finest display of greenside precision in tour history. Then in 1983, he brought his daughter Elizabeth to Augusta as his caddy, the first woman ever to carry a bag in the Masters. She was 19 years old, a sophomore at Stanford University, and had already caddied for her father at 20 previous events. It was a quiet, warm gesture from a man who rarely made headlines for the right reasons. He deserved far more recognition than he ever received. In 1996, George had his right hip replaced. The surgery was serious. Most athletes at that stage of life accept it as the end, pack up, move on, let the body rest. George Archer was 56 years old. He went back to work. 2 years later, he became the first player in the history of the Senior PGA Tour to win a tournament after undergoing a full hip replacement. Not just return to competition, win. He then went on to claim a record that nobody else in the history of the Champions Tour has ever matched. Victories in each of the first 3 decades of the tour's existence. The 1980s, the 1990s, and the 2000s, George Archer won in all 3. 32 professional titles, 5 decades, 7 major surgeries, 1 secret. In 2004, he was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma, an aggressive cancer of the lymphatic system. He underwent chemotherapy, first in Reno, then in Southern California, then at the University of California in San Francisco. In July of 2005, his family learned that the tumors had returned and that he was no longer eligible for further treatment. Donna stayed beside him throughout. He never complained, she said. He never felt sorry for himself. On August 25, 2005, George played his final round of golf, a quiet game with Donna near their home in Truckee, California. 1 month later, on September 25th, he passed away in Incline Village, Nevada. He was 6 days short of his 66th birthday. Before he died, Donna asked whether she could reveal the secret after he was gone. George thought about it. Then he said, "If you think you can do some good, then go ahead and talk about it after I'm gone." In 2008, Donna founded the George Archer Memorial Foundation for Literacy. The annual fundraiser is held every October at the Peninsula Golf and Country Club in San Mateo, the same club where a young boy once showed up and asked, "What's caddying?" To date, the foundation has raised